Elijah Thornton woke up the same way every morning, before the light, before the house stirred, before his body remembered that parts of it no longer answered him. The ceiling above his bed was made of dark cedar beams, expensive and perfectly aligned. He had chosen them himself years ago, back when decisions came easily. Now he stared at them because there was nowhere else for his eyes to go. The adjustable bed hummed softly beneath him, a low mechanical sound that reminded him, every single morning, that nothing in this room moved unless something else moved it first. Outside, the wind slid through the pine trees surrounding the estate. Aspen winters were quiet in a way that felt deliberate, like the world holding its breath. The kind of quiet people traveled thousands of miles to experience. For Elijah, it pressed against his chest. He tried, out of habit, to flex his toes. Nothing. The left side of his body felt like it belonged to someone else. Heavy. Distant. As if it had been placed there by mistake. 3 years ago, mornings had been loud. His phone buzzing before sunrise. Helicopter blades chopping the air. His own footsteps echoing through hotel hallways as he moved too fast, always too fast, toward the next obligation. People used to joke that Elijah didn't walk anywhere, he charged. Now, the farthest he traveled most days was from his bed to the window. He pressed the call button beside him. Not because he needed something urgently, but because lying alone with his thoughts for too long had become dangerous. The red light blinked once. Ruth would come soon. Until then, his mind drifted, against his will, to the accident. It always did. Not the impact itself, but the moment right after. The silence. The strange calm before pain arrived. The way the snow on the side of the road had looked almost blue under the headlights, as if the world had softened just before taking everything from him. The doctors had used careful language. Permanent damage. Limited function. Adjusting expectations. Elijah had nodded, polite even then. He had been very good at nodding while people dismantled his future piece by piece. The door opened quietly. "Good morning," Ruth said, already crossing the room. He didn't answer right away. He waited until she adjusted the blinds, letting a thin line of pale light cut across the floor. Snow reflected it back, sharp and clean. "You have someone new starting today," Ruth added, keeping her voice neutral. Elijah exhaled through his nose. "You said that last month. And the month before. They don't stay." Ruth paused, her hands resting on the back of his wheelchair. This one asked for the position. That made him turn his head slightly. "Why?" She didn't say. Elijah looked back at the ceiling. People always wanted something. Money. Connections. A story they could tell later. Caregivers were no different, no matter how gentle they pretended to be at first. "Send her in," he said finally. "We'll see how long she lasts." Ruth studied him for a moment as if she wanted to say something else. Then she nodded and left the room. Alone again, Elijah listened to the clock on the far wall. Each tick sounded louder than the last. He wondered what this one would be like. Too cheerful? Too careful? The kind who apologized every time she touched him, as if his body were already broken enough without being treated like glass? Footsteps approached. Slower than Ruth's. Lighter. The door opened. Elijah didn't look right away. He waited for the familiar rush of introductions, credentials, forced enthusiasm. None came. "Good morning, Mr. Thornton," a woman said. Her voice was calm. Not soft. Not loud. When he finally turned his head, he saw her standing just inside the doorway, holding a single duffel bag at her feet. Dark jacket. Practical shoes. Her hair pulled back simply, no effort made to impress the room she was standing in. She met his eyes without flinching. "I'm Naomi Rivers," she said. "I'm here to help you. Not take care of you. Not fix you. Help." Something about that unsettled him. She waited, patient but not submissive, as if she understood silence wasn't a test she needed to pass. Elijah felt a strange tightening in his chest. A feeling he didn't recognize right away. Curiosity. If you're new here and you want to see where this moment leads, how one quiet arrival begins to change everything, consider subscribing and staying with this story. Some journeys don't reveal their meaning right away. Naomi took one small step forward, setting her bag down. "Where would you like to start?" she asked. Elijah studied her, searching for the thing that would eventually drive her away. For the first time in years, he wasn't sure he would find it. Elijah learned early that caregivers came in patterns. There were the overly cautious ones, usually fresh out of training. They hovered, asked permission for every movement, apologized when he winced, even if the pain had nothing to do with them. They treated his body like fragile glass, and after a few days, Elijah found himself exhausted from reassuring the people who were supposed to reassure him. Then there were the efficient ones. Stopwatch types. They followed schedules with military precision. Bath at 8. Therapy at 10. Lunch at noon. They rarely looked him in the eye. He was a checklist, not a man. They lasted longer, but only because they never noticed how cold the house felt when no one actually spoke. And finally, there were the ones who tried to save him. They talked too much. Told him stories he didn't ask for. Played music they assumed he'd like. Told him, with voices bright and hopeful, that attitude was everything. Those were the ones he dismissed the fastest. Naomi did none of that. Her second day began without ceremony. No cheerful greeting. No motivational quote taped to the wall. She entered the room, checked his positioning, and adjusted the curtains just enough to let light in without blinding him. "Is that okay?" she asked, already watching his face. "Yes," he said, surprised by how quickly the answer came. She prepared his morning routine in silence, but it wasn't the uncomfortable kind. The air didn't feel like it needed filling. When she helped him shift, her hands were firm, steady, confident. She didn't apologize. She didn't rush. Elijah noticed that she waited after each movement, just long enough for him to register what his body was doing. "You can tell me if something feels wrong," she said. "I won't guess." Most people guessed. Wrong. By midday, Elijah realized something else that unsettled him. She wasn't watching the clock. During lunch, she placed the tray carefully, then sat across from him, not too close, not too far, and ate her own meal quietly. No phone. No distraction. Just present. "You don't have to stay," he said. "You're not required to eat with me." She shrugged. "I know." That was it. No explanation. No guilt. Just a fact. He studied her while pretending not to. The way she listened when he spoke, even if it was only a sentence. The way she didn't flinch when he grew short or blunt. The way she noticed things without commenting on them. The tremor in his hand, the slight hitch in his breathing when the pain spiked. In the afternoon, Ruth stopped by to check in. "How's it going?" she asked Naomi. "Fine," Naomi said. "We're figuring things out." Ruth looked at Elijah, clearly expecting a complaint. He gave none. After Ruth left, Naomi wheeled him toward the window overlooking the trees. Snow had begun to fall, slow and deliberate. "I usually don't sit here this long," Elijah said. "Do you want to move?" Naomi asked. He considered it. No. They watched the snow fall in silence. Later, during physical therapy, Elijah's frustration finally surfaced. His arms slipped from Naomi's grasp, muscles refusing to cooperate. "Don't pull like that," he snapped. "I'm not a sack of—" Naomi stopped immediately. She loosened her grip and met his eyes. "Tell me when it's too much," she said evenly. "Not after." There was no anger in her voice. No offense taken. Just a boundary placed gently but firmly between them. Elijah opened his mouth to argue. Then he closed it. Something shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough to be noticeable. That night, after Naomi left, Elijah lay awake longer than usual. He replayed the day in his head, searching for the familiar irritation, the urge to push her away before she could disappoint him. It didn't come. Instead, a different thought crept in, unwelcome and persistent. She hadn't treated him like a burden. She hadn't treated him like a project. She had treated him like someone who would still be here tomorrow. Elijah stared into the darkness, listening to the wind outside. He told himself it meant nothing. But somewhere down the hall, Naomi's quiet footsteps echoed as she gathered her things. And for the first time in a long while, Elijah wondered what would happen if this one didn't leave. By the third morning, Elijah stopped counting down the hours. He didn't realize he'd been doing it until the habit was gone. Most caregivers left a faint tension in him, a silent clock ticking toward the moment they'd disappoint him or he'd find a reason to send them away. With Naomi, the hours passed without that familiar weight. The day moved forward on its own, unannounced. She arrived just before 7 as she had the days before. No rushing. No unnecessary noise. The house seemed to adjust to her presence as if it had learned her rhythm. "Morning," she said, setting her bag down near the door. He nodded. "You're early." "I like to be," she replied. "It gives the day some space." He almost laughed at that. His days felt like cages, not rooms with space. Still, he didn't challenge her. As she helped him sit up, he watched her more openly this time. The way she assessed his posture before touching him. The faint scar near her wrist, pale against dark skin. The absence of jewelry, except for a thin band on her finger that looked more practical than sentimental. "You don't talk much," he said. "You do enough for both of us," she replied deadpan. The corner of his mouth twitched despite himself. Later that morning, Ruth appeared again, clipboard in hand. She asked the usual questions. Pain levels. Schedule adjustments. Concerns. Naomi answered simply, without exaggeration. "He's more comfortable by the window," she said. "And he prefers direct instructions." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" Elijah realized Naomi hadn't asked him whether she could share those observations. She'd just known it would be useful. After Ruth left, Elijah said, "Most people ask before speaking for me." Naomi adjusted the blanket over his legs. "You can correct me if I'm wrong. And if you're right, then we move on." It was a strange relief not having to protect his preferences like secrets. In the afternoon, Elijah requested to be taken outside. It wasn't something he did often. The cold usually aggravated his pain, and the effort rarely felt worth it. Naomi didn't question him. She helped him into a heavier jacket, checked the chair's battery, and guided him through the wide doors that led onto the stone terrace. The air hit his face sharply. Cling. Cold enough to sting. "Still okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said, breathing deeper than he had in days. They sat there longer than planned. Snow crunched faintly beneath Naomi's boots as she shifted her weight. Somewhere in the distance, a bird called out, its sound thin against the open sky. "This place is quiet," Naomi said. "But not empty." He studied her profile. "Most people think it's lonely." "Lonely is when you feel invisible," she replied. "This just feels still." He didn't know how she'd managed to name the difference so easily. On the way back inside, Elijah noticed his hand shaking slightly. The cold, probably. Or the effort. Naomi noticed too. She didn't comment. She simply adjusted his gloves, slower this time, giving his body a chance to catch up. That evening, while she prepared his dinner, Elijah spoke without thinking. "You're not intimidated." Naomi glanced at him. "By what?" "By me." She considered the question. "You're a man in a chair," she said finally. "That's not the scariest thing I've seen." He felt something twist in his chest, not offense but recognition. After she left for the night, Elijah found himself replaying small moments. The way she'd waited before moving him. The way she'd answered his questions without defensiveness. The way she'd laughed once, quietly, when he'd complained about the food. He realized then what made her different. She wasn't here to impress him. She wasn't here to save him. She was here because she'd chosen to be, and that choice felt heavier than any obligation. As he lay awake, listening to the house settle, Elijah felt a flicker of something unfamiliar. Not hope. Expectation. And it frightened him more than he wanted to admit. By the end of the first week, the house had changed its sound. Elijah noticed it late one night when sleep refused to come. The estate used to groan and echo after dark, every creak exaggerated by emptiness. Now, even when Naomi wasn't there, the silence felt settled. As if the walls had stopped waiting for something to happen. He didn't like that thought. It felt dangerous. The next morning, Naomi arrived with the same quiet consistency. No knock. Ruth had given her access codes on the third day. That, more than anything, signaled trust. "Morning," Naomi said, setting her bag down. Elijah watched the way she moved through the room. She didn't tiptoe. She didn't rush. She knew where things were now. The extra pillow. The water glass. The medication organizer Ruth checked twice a day. "You're getting comfortable," he said. She glanced at him. "Is that a problem?" "Depends." "On what?" "On whether comfort makes people careless." Naomi considered this while adjusting his chair. "Or it makes them pay attention," she said. "Fear can be noisy. Comfort listens better." He had no response ready. That annoyed him. Later, during his morning routine, Naomi asked, "Do you want to try something different today?" He frowned. "Different how?" "There's a sitting exercise we haven't done yet. It's harder. Might frustrate you." He almost said no out of reflex. Elijah had spent 3 years avoiding frustration. It reminded him too much of what he'd lost. But something about the way she said it, honest, unprotective, made him pause. "Fine," he said. "But don't pretend it'll be good for me." She nodded. "I won't." The exercise was slow. Painful. His muscles resisted, trembling under effort that once would have been nothing. Halfway through, his jaw tightened. His breathing grew uneven. "Stop," he said sharply. Naomi stopped immediately. She didn't apologize. She didn't rush to reassure him. She waited, watching his face, giving him space to decide what came next. After a moment, Elijah said quieter, "I hate this." "I know," she replied. "Not I'm sorry. Not it will get better. Just the truth." That afternoon, Naomi suggested they reorganize the study. "I don't go in there," Elijah said. "I know." "Then why bring it up?" "Because you looked at the door yesterday like it was watching you." He stiffened. "You're imagining things." "Maybe," she said. "Or maybe some rooms get heavier when they're avoided." The study door creaked when Naomi pushed it open. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by slanted light from tall windows. Elijah hadn't been inside since before the accident. The room still smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. Naomi didn't comment on the framed photos lining the walls. She didn't ask about the awards on the shelves. She focused on practical things, clearing a path, adjusting the lighting, making space. As she worked, Elijah felt a low pressure build behind his ribs. Memory stirred, unwanted. "You don't have to finish today," he said. "I'm not," she replied. "Just starting." That word echoed. Starting. Later, while Naomi wiped dust from a shelf, she paused at a photograph. Elijah noticed the stillness in her posture. "Who's that?" she asked. He turned his head slowly. The photo showed a younger version of himself, standing in a hospital hallway. His suit jacket was off. His tie loosened. Beside him stood a black teenage girl, her expression tight with fear, her arm wrapped in a sling. Elijah's stomach dropped. "No one important," he said too quickly. Naomi didn't argue. She studied the photo a moment longer, then set it face down on the desk. "Okay," she said. But the room felt different after that. Charged. Like something had been disturbed. That evening, Naomi finished her shift as usual. No awkwardness. No lingering questions. After she left, Elijah lay awake, staring into the dark. The image from the photo replayed in his mind, sharper now. The girl's face. The way she'd clutched his sleeve. He hadn't thought about her in years. As sleep finally crept in, one thought surfaced, unwelcome and insistent. Naomi hadn't pushed, which meant she would remember. And Elijah had the uneasy sense that whatever she'd just uncovered wasn't done waiting. The second week began with tension Elijah couldn't name. Nothing obvious had changed. Naomi arrived on time. The routines held. Meals were prepared, medications administered, therapy completed. Yet beneath it all, something felt tighter, like a wire drawn too close to snapping. It showed up in small ways. Elijah corrected Naomi twice over minor things she hadn't done wrong. He criticized the way she positioned his chair near the window, then asked her to move it back 5 minutes later. He told himself he was just being particular. Honest. Still in control. Naomi didn't argue. She made the adjustments without comment. But she watched him more closely now, as if listening for something he hadn't said. During physical therapy that afternoon, the tension finally broke. They were working on arm extension, a movement Elijah despised. His muscles shook, refusing to obey commands his brain sent with increasing urgency. Sweat gathered at his temples. "Hold it," Naomi said calmly. "Just a few more seconds." His arm slipped. Pain shot through his shoulder, sharp and immediate. "I said stop," Elijah snapped, louder than he intended. "Don't pull like that." Naomi released him instantly. His arm dropped back onto the support, heavy and useless. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Elijah's chest rose and fell too quickly. He stared at the far wall, jaw clenched, waiting for what usually came next. An apology, a retreat, the subtle shift that said I'm walking on eggshells now. Instead, Naomi straightened and met his eyes. "Tell me when it's too much," she said. Her voice was steady. "Not after." The words landed harder than his anger. "What?" he said. "I can't feel what you feel," she continued. "If you wait until it hurts, we're both already behind." "You think I don't know that?" he shot back. "You think I enjoy this?" "No," Naomi said. "I think you wait until you're overwhelmed, then lash out so you don't have to ask for help." The room went very still. Elijah stared at her, stunned. Caregivers didn't say things like that. They avoided truths that sharp. "You don't get to psychoanalyze me," he said coldly. "I'm not," she replied. "I'm setting a boundary." A boundary. The word echoed in his head, unfamiliar in this context. Boundaries were for people with options. For bodies that listened. For lives that could afford conflict. "Maybe you should find another job," Elijah said, the old reflex kicking in. "Push first. End it before it ends you." Naomi didn't move. "If that's what you want," she said, "say it. Don't use pain as a weapon." Something in her tone, firm but not cruel, made his throat tighten. Elijah looked away. His hands trembled, partly from exertion, partly from something else entirely. "I didn't mean," he stopped. The rest of the sentence refused to form. Naomi waited. She didn't fill the silence. She didn't rescue him from it. After a long moment, Elijah exhaled. The anger drained out of him, leaving something raw behind. "I don't know when it's too much," he said quietly. "It all feels like too much." Naomi's expression softened, but she didn't rush forward. "Then we figure it out together," she said. "But I need you to talk to me before you break." They finished the session carefully. Slower. With more pauses. It wasn't easier, but it felt different. Sure. That evening, Naomi prepared dinner while Elijah watched from the table. The clatter of utensils, the low hum of the refrigerator, ordinary sounds that grounded the room. "You didn't have to stay," he said. She glanced at him. "Neither did you." He almost smiled. After she left, Elijah sat alone longer than usual. He replayed the confrontation in his mind, not with regret, but with a strange sense of relief. She hadn't backed down. She hadn't threatened to quit. She had stayed and demanded honesty. As he finally settled into bed, a thought surfaced that unsettled him more than the argument had. Naomi wasn't just learning how to care for his body. She was learning how to read the parts of him he'd spent years hiding. And Elijah wasn't sure how long he could keep those parts out of reach. Naomi didn't talk about where she came from. Elijah noticed that almost immediately. When he asked casual questions, where she learned certain techniques, how long she'd been certified, she answered directly, then stopped. No embellishment. No personal anecdotes offered up like currency. It wasn't secrecy. It felt more like economy. As if she'd learned early that stories cost something, and she preferred to spend carefully. Still, pieces slipped through. She pronounced certain words with a softness that didn't belong in Colorado. She measured weather differently, calling the cold sharp instead of brutal. And when Elijah complained about the silence at night, Naomi said without thinking, "Silence is easier than sirens." That caught him. "Sirens?" he asked. She paused, hand resting on the kitchen counter. Just for a second. Then she continued rinsing a mug. "Where I'm from," she said, "quiet usually means something's wrong." Elijah let it go, but the image stayed with him. Later that week, during a lull in the afternoon, Naomi sat at the table filling out paperwork while Elijah reviewed emails on his tablet. Snow tapped lightly against the window, a soft, persistent sound. "You ever miss it?" he asked suddenly. She looked up. "Miss what?" "Where you're from." Naomi leaned back in her chair, considering. "I miss parts of it," she said. "The land. The way people know when to leave you alone. And the rest. I don't miss feeling stuck." That word again. Stuck. It resonated in places Elijah didn't like to examine. He watched her hands as she spoke. Strong hands. Calloused in places no manicure could hide. Hands that had worked long before they'd been trained. Naomi grew up in a town outside Greenwood, Mississippi. Small enough that everyone knew which houses had working heat in the winter and which ones didn't. Her mother worked cleaning jobs, motels, offices, houses with families who smiled politely and learned Naomi's name only after years of seeing her in the background. Her grandmother had lived with them after the stroke. Naomi had been 11 when she learned how to lift an adult body without hurting either of them. 13 when she learned how to read medication labels better than some nurses. By 16 she knew the sound of pain you couldn't fix. The bus accident came late one night. Rain slicked the road. Tires screamed. Metal screamed louder. She remembered waking up in a hospital that smelled like antiseptic and fear. Remembered the way her mother's face collapsed when the doctor explained the surgery they couldn't afford. What Naomi didn't remember, what she never knew, was the man who stood in the hallway outside her room that night. The one who argued quietly with administrators. The one who signed papers and walked away before gratitude could find him. She only knew she'd survived. That someone somewhere had decided her life was worth the cost. Now years later she sat in a billionaire's kitchen, stirring soup while he pretended not to watch her. "You okay?" Elijah asked. She nodded. "Just thinking." He hesitated, then said, "You don't have to carry everything by yourself." Naomi smiled faintly. "I know." But the truth was she'd been carrying things alone for a long time. Responsibility had shaped her before choice ever could. Caring wasn't something she'd learned, it was something she'd done because no one else would. That night, after her shift ended, Naomi stood in the driveway for a moment before getting into her car. The house loomed behind her, all glass and stone and quiet power. A world she still didn't fully belong to. Her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. An unfamiliar number, area code from Mississippi. She stared at it longer than necessary. Then she answered. "Hello." There was a pause. Then a voice she hadn't heard in months said her name, carefully, like it might break. Naomi closed her eyes, the weight of two lives, past and present, pressing together. Inside the house, Elijah watched her taillights disappear down the drive, unaware that the distance between them was about to feel much smaller, and much more complicated. By the third week, Elijah noticed something unsettling. He was talking again. Not in meetings. Not to lawyers or doctors or people who waited for him to finish so they could move on. He was talking in fragments at first. Comments about the weather, observations about the way snow collected unevenly on the terrace railing, complaints about how the coffee tasted different depending on who made it. Naomi never reacted the way he expected. She didn't look surprised. She didn't encourage him with nods or soft affirmations. She treated his words like they were normal. Like they'd always been there. That, more than anything, kept him going. One morning as she adjusted his chair, Elijah said, "I used to hate mornings." Naomi glanced at him. "Used to?" "I hated the waiting," he continued. "The feeling that if I stopped moving, I'd fall behind." "And now?" she asked. He thought about it. About the way mornings stretched now, unhurried and sometimes heavy, but no longer sharp with panic. "Now I hate them for different reasons," he said. She smiled just a little. "That's still progress." Later that day, Naomi brought him his tablet, already open to an article she thought he'd want to read. She didn't explain why. She didn't justify her choice. She simply placed it within reach and waited. Elijah scanned the headline. A deep dive into corporate governance loopholes. Dry. That's Exactly the kind of thing that reminded him who he used to be. "You think I care about this?" he asked. "I think you care about control," Naomi said. "And this is about who keeps it." He read the entire article. In the afternoon he asked her to open the curtains fully. The light flooded the room, too bright at first. He almost asked her to close them again. Almost. Instead he squinted and adjusted. "You're getting used to discomfort," Naomi observed. "Don't get carried away," he replied. "I still hate it." She laughed then. A short sound surprised out of her before she could stop it. Elijah felt something loosen in his chest. They fell into a rhythm. Therapy. Meals. Long stretches of quiet punctuated by conversation that wandered unexpectedly. Elijah found himself telling her about business decisions he regretted. Deals that looked clean on paper and rotted later. Friends he'd misjudged because charm was easier to read than character. Naomi listened without interrupting. "You ever wish you'd chosen differently?" she asked once. "All the time," he said. "But wishing doesn't undo momentum." "No," she agreed. "But it can change where you point it next." He studied her. "You talk like someone who's had to start over." Naomi didn't answer right away. She stood rinsing a plate, her back to him. "I talk like someone who didn't have a choice," she said finally. That evening, Elijah asked to be taken back into the study. Naomi paused at the doorway. "You sure?" "Yes." She moved carefully as if the room might react to their presence. Dust still lingered in the corners, but the air felt lighter than it had before. Less accusatory. Elijah gestured toward the shelves. "I used to spend hours in here," he said, "reading things that didn't matter." "Did they matter then?" Naomi asked. "They made me feel prepared," he replied. "Like if I knew enough, nothing could surprise me." She glanced at the framed photos again but didn't stop this time. "Did it work?" Elijah let out a dry breath. "No." Later, as Naomi prepared to leave, Elijah said, "You can take tomorrow morning off." She looked surprised. "Why?" "Because I want to try something alone," he said. "Just once." Naomi studied his face, weighing the request. "I'll check in," she said. "Not hover." "That's acceptable," he replied. After she left, Elijah lay awake longer than usual, his mind unusually busy. He wasn't thinking about pain, or loss, or the future in the abstract way he usually did. He was thinking about choices. Small ones. The kind that didn't announce themselves as turning points. In the driveway, Naomi sat in her car, phone in her hand again. The Mississippi number blinked on the screen, unanswered. She stared at it, then turned the phone face down and started the engine. Both of them, in separate spaces, felt the same quiet pull. Something was moving. And neither of them knew yet what it was about to uncover. Elijah woke earlier than usual the next morning. Not because of pain. Not because of the familiar stiffness that settled into his joints before dawn. He woke because his mind wouldn't slow down. Thoughts bumped into each other, unfinished and insistent, like they'd been waiting for permission to speak. He lay there listening to the house. The distant hum of the heating system. The faint tick of the clock. Naomi wouldn't arrive for another half hour. He told himself to rest. To enjoy the quiet. Instead, he pressed the button to raise the head of the bed and stared toward the doorway. When Naomi arrived, her greeting was the same as always. "Come. Steady." "Morning," she said. He nodded. "You're on time." She smiled faintly. "I try." The morning routine went smoothly. Almost too smoothly. Naomi was efficient but distracted, her attention split in subtle ways Elijah couldn't immediately place. She double-checked his medication, then checked it again. She paused mid-task once as if she'd forgotten what came next. "You okay?" he asked. "Yes," she said quickly. "Just didn't sleep much." He accepted the answer, though it didn't sit quite right. By early afternoon, Naomi suggested he rest while she handled a few things around the house. Elijah agreed. He closed his eyes, letting the chair recline slightly, and drifted in and out of shallow sleep. That was when he heard her voice. At first, it blended into the dream he was having. Familiar but distant. Then a word cut through, sharp enough to wake him. "No," Naomi said. Firm. Controlled. "I already told you I sent what I could." Elijah opened his eyes. The sound was coming from the hallway just outside his room. Her voice was lower now, careful. Not whispered, but restrained in the way people get when they don't want to be overheard. "I know it's not enough yet," she continued. "I'm working. I'm trying." Pause. Elijah imagined someone on the other end of the line, saying something that made her jaw tighten. "I can't come back," Naomi said. "Not right now." Another pause. Longer this time. Her voice softened, but there was something fragile under it. "Because if I do, I won't leave again." Elijah felt a strange pressure in his chest. He stayed still, every instinct telling him not to announce himself. This wasn't meant for him. And yet it had found him anyway. "I'm not abandoning anyone," Naomi said. "I'm choosing something different." Silence. Then quieter. "I love you. But I can't fix everything." The call ended. Elijah heard her exhale, long and shaky, as if she'd been holding her breath the entire time. Footsteps followed. Slower than usual. He closed his eyes again just as Naomi re-entered the room. She looked composed. Too composed. Her expression had settled into the careful neutrality Elijah had come to recognize as effort. "Did I wake you?" she asked. "No," he said. "I was already up." She nodded, adjusting the blanket over his legs. Her hands were steady again. They didn't speak for several minutes. Elijah's mind replayed fragments of the conversation. "I sent what I could. I won't leave again. I'm choosing something different." "You don't have to explain," he said finally. Naomi looked at him, surprised. "Explain what?" "Whatever that was," he replied. "It's not my business." She studied his face, searching for judgment. Finding none seemed to unsettle her more than if he'd pressed. "Thank you," she said quietly. The rest of the afternoon passed with a strange tenderness layered over everything. Naomi was attentive, but gentler than usual, as if conserving energy. Elijah found himself choosing his words more carefully too, avoiding the sharper edges of his usual commentary. During dinner, he said, "You ever feel like you're standing in two places at once?" Naomi froze for just a second. Then she nodded. "Yes." "It's exhausting," he added. "Yes," she agreed again, and this time her voice carried weight. That night, after Naomi left, Elijah lay awake thinking about the call. About obligations that followed people no matter how far they traveled. About the cost of choosing yourself when others needed you not to. He realized something then with a clarity that surprised him. Naomi hadn't come here to escape her life. She'd come here because staying where she was would have swallowed her whole. In her small apartment across town, Naomi sat on the edge of her bed, phone in her hand. The screen was dark now, the call long ended, but the words still echoed. "If I come back, I won't leave again." She stared at the wall, then at the ceiling, then finally at her reflection in the darkened window. She had crossed state lines to build something new, only to discover the past didn't respect distance. Her phone buzzed once more. Same number. She didn't answer. But as she set the phone down, a thought surfaced that made her chest tighten. Sooner or later, she wouldn't be able to keep both worlds apart. And when that moment came, someone was going to get hurt. The study didn't feel the same the second time. Elijah noticed at the moment Naomi wheeled him through the doorway. The air was still but not heavy. Dust no longer clung to the light the way it had before. The room felt awake, as if it had been listening since the last visit. Naomi paused just inside, her hand resting on the back of his chair. "You sure you want to be in here today?" "Yes," Elijah said. The word came out firmer than he expected. She nodded and moved farther in, opening the curtains fully this time. Sunlight spilled across the floor, catching on old paper and polished wood. The shelves lined the walls from floor to ceiling, filled with books Elijah hadn't touched in years. Legal volumes, biographies, reports he once believed would protect him from surprise. Naomi didn't start cleaning. She didn't reorganize. She simply stood letting him take it in. "This used to be my favorite room," Elijah said. "Used to?" she asked. "I like knowing things," he replied. "Facts. Patterns. If I understood the rules, I could work around them. And now," he swallowed, "now I know the rules don't care how well you understand them." Naomi rested against the desk, careful not to lean too hard. "That sounds disappointing." "It is," he said. Then, after a pause, but also clarifying, they sat there in silence for a while. The kind of silence that didn't press for conversation but allowed it if it wanted to arrive. Naomi moved along the shelves slowly, her fingers trailing over book spines. She stopped once, pulled a volume halfway out, then slid it back in place. "You read all of these?" she asked. "Most of them," Elijah said. "Some I just wanted people to see me reading." She smiled at that. "Fair." As she turned, her gaze landed on the framed photographs along the far wall. Naomi slowed. Not abruptly, but enough that Elijah noticed. She stopped in front of one photo in particular. The same one. The hospital hallway. The younger Elijah. The teenage girl with braids and a sling. Naomi tilted her head, studying it. "This doesn't look like the rest." Elijah felt his throat tighten. "It's old." "That's not what I meant," she said gently. "You look different." He closed his eyes briefly. "That was a bad year." She didn't push. She didn't ask who the girl was. She simply nodded as if that explained something important. "Sometimes," Naomi said quietly, "the years that hurt the most are the ones that make us unrecognizable later." Elijah opened his eyes. The photograph felt heavier now, like it had shifted closer without moving. "Do you want me to put it away?" she asked. "No," he said quickly. Too quickly. "Just leave it." Naomi did. But she didn't look away right away either. Her expression wasn't curious. It was thoughtful. As if something about the image had settled into a place in her mind she hadn't expected it to fit. They stayed in the study longer than planned. Elijah talked more than he meant to. About a deal he'd nearly lost early in his career. About the first office he'd rented, barely big enough for a desk and a chair. About the nights he'd slept on a couch because going home felt like wasted time. Naomi listened, occasionally asking questions that surprised him with their insight. "You ever stop to ask who paid for that pace?" she said at one point. He considered it. "I assumed I was." She met his eyes. People usually assumed that. When it was time to leave the study, Naomi turned off the lights but left the curtains open. The room didn't disappear into darkness this time. It waited. That evening, Naomi helped Elijah settle in for the night. She moved more slowly than usual, as if measuring each action. "You okay?" Elijah asked. "Yes," she said, then hesitated. "Can I ask you something?" He braced himself. "Depends." "Why do you keep the things that hurt you where you can see them?" The question landed softly, but it stayed. "I don't know," Elijah admitted. "Maybe so I don't forget who I was." Naomi nodded. "Or who you helped." The words surprised both of them. She straightened as if she hadn't meant to say that out loud. Elijah stared at the ceiling, his heart beating faster. Neither of them mentioned the photograph again. But later, alone in her car, Naomi sat with the image burned into her mind. The girl's braids. The hospital light. The man beside her, serious and tired. A memory stirred. Not clear. Just a feeling. A hallway. A voice arguing softly. A hand steady on a clipboard. Naomi shook her head, trying to dismiss it. Some connections, she told herself, were coincidences. But as she drove away, that photo followed her, its meaning hovering just out of reach. And Elijah, staring into the dark, wondered how long he could keep pretending that the past wasn't inching closer, one quiet question at a time. Naomi didn't sleep well that night. She kept waking with the sense that she had forgotten something important, the way a name sits on the tip of your tongue and refuses to land. Each time she closed her eyes, the hospital hallway returned. White walls. The faint smell of disinfectant. Shoes squeaking on polished floors. And a voice. Oh, controlled. Familiar. She sat up in bed before dawn, heart racing for no clear reason. The room was quiet. Too quiet. She rubbed her face, annoyed at herself. It's just a picture, she whispered into the dark. But her mind didn't listen. By morning, Naomi moved through the house on autopilot. She prepared Elijah's breakfast, helped him wash up, adjusted his blankets. He noticed the slight stiffness in her movements, the way her smile arrived half a second late. "You're distracted," he said as she set the tray on his lap. "Am I that obvious?" she asked. "To me," he replied. She hesitated, then shook her head lightly. "Didn't sleep well." Elijah studied her. "Bad dreams?" "More like unfinished ones," she said, then waved it off. "Eat before it gets cold." He did, but slowly, watching her as she tidied the room, straightening things that were already straight. Later that morning, Naomi asked if she could step out for a bit. "I need to run an errand," she said. "Won't be long." Elijah nodded. "Take your time." She didn't tell him where she was going. The hospital hadn't changed much. That surprised her. The same pale walls. The same muted hum of activity. Even the chairs in the waiting area looked familiar, as if they had been bolted to memory itself. Naomi stood just inside the entrance, her chest tight. She hadn't planned this. Not consciously. Her feet had simply brought her here. She approached the reception desk. "Hi," she said. "I'm looking for some old records." The woman behind the desk barely glanced up. "How old?" "About 15 years, Naomi replied. "Pediatric wing." That got her attention. "You family?" Naomi hesitated. "I think so." The receptionist sighed, already tired of the day. "Names?" Naomi swallowed. Her own came easily. The other didn't. "I don't remember," she admitted. The woman's expression softened, just a fraction. "Then I'm afraid there's not much I can do." Naomi nodded, embarrassment flushing her cheeks. "I understand. Thank you." She turned away, feeling foolish. This was ridiculous. Chasing shadows because of a photograph. As she headed toward the exit, a familiar laugh echoed down the hall. Naomi stopped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't recent. It lived somewhere deeper than sound. Her body moved before her mind could stop it, guiding her toward the pediatric wing. Each step made her breathing shallower. The hallway narrowed. The air felt heavier. Then she saw it. A faded mural on the wall. Cartoon animals dancing beneath painted clouds. Her knees went weak. She remembered this. She remembered lying in a bed too big for her, her arm wrapped in bandages. She remembered pretending to be brave while fear crawled up her throat. And she remembered him. Naomi closed her eyes, the memory rushing in all at once. A man in a dark suit, standing awkwardly beside her bed. Not a doctor. Not family. Just someone who refused to leave until she was safe. He had argued quietly with a nurse. Insisted on calling someone. Filled out forms he had no obligation to fill. "What's your name?" he had asked her. "Naomi," she'd whispered. "Well, Naomi," he'd said gently, "you're going to be okay. I promise." Her eyes flew open. Elijah. The name hit her like a wave. She staggered back, gripping the wall for support. Her heart pounded so loudly she wondered if anyone else could hear it. The man in the photograph wasn't just familiar. He was the man who had stayed when everyone else assumed someone else would. Naomi left the hospital in a daze, the sunlight outside too bright, too sharp. She sat in her car for several minutes before she trusted herself to drive. So he hadn't just been present in her worst year. He had been part of it. Back at the house, Elijah noticed the change immediately. Naomi was quieter than usual. Her hands trembled as she poured him water. "Naomi," he said carefully, "what happened?" She met his eyes, and for the first time since she'd known him, she looked afraid. "I went somewhere today," she said. His chest tightened. "Where?" "The hospital." The silence that followed was thick. Elijah looked away first. "I think," Naomi continued softly, "we've met before." His fingers curled against the armrest. "I think," she said, voice barely steady, "you saved me." Elijah closed his eyes. Because in that moment he knew the past had finally caught up. And neither of them knew what it was going to demand in return. Elijah didn't answer right away. The room felt smaller, as if the walls had edged closer while Naomi waited. Outside the window, a lawn sprinkler clicked rhythmically, the sound oddly loud in the silence. "You shouldn't dig around in old places," Elijah said at last. His voice was calm, but something in it was off. Too measured. Too careful. Naomi stayed where she was. "You didn't say I was wrong." He shifted in his chair, the quiet whir of the motor breaking the stillness. He turned slightly, not fully facing her. "I've been to many hospitals," he said. "Over many years." "That mural," Naomi said. "The animals on the wall. You commented on them. You said the giraffe looked like it had a stiff neck." Elijah's jaw tightened. "That's a common mural," he replied. Naomi shook her head. "You also argued with a nurse. You said no child should be discharged without someone to take responsibility." He looked at her then. Really looked. And the mask slipped just for a second. "You remember more than you think," he said quietly. Her chest tightened. "So it's true." Elijah exhaled slowly, as if releasing a breath he'd been holding for years. "I didn't save you," he said. "I made a phone call. That's all." "That phone call changed everything," Naomi replied. He didn't argue. Instead, he looked past her, toward the hallway that led to the spare bedroom. "You were alone?" he said. "No one answered when the hospital called the number you gave." The social worker was preparing paperwork. Naomi's throat burned. She remembered the fear. The way adults spoke in hushed tones when they thought she couldn't hear. "I couldn't walk away," Elijah continued. "I thought someone else would step in. A relative. Anyone. But no one did," Naomi said. "No," he agreed. She sat down slowly, her legs suddenly weak. "You never told me." "There was no reason to," he said. "This arrangement was about care. Boundaries." Naomi let out a humorless laugh. "You hired me because I knew how to care for you. Or because you recognized me?" Elijah stiffened. "I didn't recognize you at first," he said quickly. "Too quickly. You were a child then. People change." "But you remembered," she pressed. "At some point you remembered." He didn't respond. That was answer enough. The truth settled between them, heavy and uncomfortable. Naomi felt a strange mix of gratitude and unease twisting inside her. The man who had once protected her was now dependent on her. The balance had shifted in a way that made her skin prickle. "Why didn't you say anything when you realized?" she asked. Elijah's gaze dropped to his hands. "Because I didn't want it to matter." "It matters to me," Naomi said. "I know," he replied softly. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Naomi moved through her tasks with practiced efficiency, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Every glance at Elijah carried new weight. Every word felt layered with meaning. That evening, as she prepared dinner, the doorbell rang. Naomi frowned. Visitors were rare. She opened the door to find a woman in a tailored coat, her hair pulled back tightly. Her smile was polite, but her eyes were sharp. "Naomi Carter?" the woman asked. Naomi nodded. "Yes." "I'm Cynthia Lowell," she said, extending a hand Naomi didn't take. "I represent Mr. Hale's estate." Naomi's stomach dropped. "Is something wrong?" Cynthia glanced past her into the house. "I'd like a word. About your role here." Naomi stepped aside, unease crawling up her spine. The woman entered, her heels clicking decisively against the floor. Elijah heard them. "Cynthia," he called out. "This isn't necessary." Cynthia smiled tightly. "On the contrary, Elijah. It's overdue." Naomi stood frozen as Cynthia turned to her. "You may not be aware," she said coolly, "but certain past connections can complicate things." Naomi's heart pounded. "What connections?" Cynthia's gaze flicked to Elijah. "The kind that could raise questions. Legal ones." Elijah's voice hardened. "Leave her out of this." But Cynthia had already begun to lay papers on the table. And Naomi realized with a chill that her past wasn't just resurfacing. It was about to be used against her. Cynthia didn't sit down right away. She stood by the table, arranging the papers as if precision alone could control the room. Naomi watched her hands, steady, manicured, practiced. These were not the hands of someone here to ask questions. These were the hands of someone here to take something. Elijah's jaw was set. "You should have called first." "And give you time to prepare?" Cynthia replied lightly. "That wouldn't serve my client." "I am your client," Elijah said. She smiled at him the way one smiles at a child who has misunderstood the rules. "You're one of them." Naomi felt the temperature in the room drop. "I don't understand why you're here," she said. "If there's an issue with my work." "This isn't about your performance," Cynthia interrupted. "By all accounts, you're very good at what you do." "That doesn't sound reassuring," Naomi said. Cynthia finally looked at her fully. "Mr. Hale's estate is substantial, complex, and currently vulnerable." Elijah let out a short, humorless breath. "You're talking about capacity." "I'm talking about exposure," Cynthia corrected. "You're paralyzed, Elijah. Dependent. Emotional attachments can be exploited." Naomi stiffened. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Not yet," Cynthia said calmly. "But history matters." Elijah's voice sharpened. "Enough." Cynthia raised an eyebrow. "You didn't tell her, did you? About the trust clause." Naomi turned to him. "What clause?" Elijah looked away. Cynthia took that as permission. "There's a provision in Elijah's long-term care trust. Any caregiver with a documented personal history connected to him prior to his injury must be disclosed. Failure to do so gives the estate grounds to intervene." Naomi's ears rang. "Intervene how?" "Removal," Cynthia said. "Replacement. Review of past payments." Naomi's chest tightened. "You can't just." "We can," Cynthia replied. "And we will unless this is addressed properly." Elijah leaned forward in his chair, his voice low and dangerous. "You're threatening her because I didn't tell you about a child from 15 years ago?" "I'm protecting assets," Cynthia said. "And reputations." Naomi felt suddenly small. Not powerless but exposed. As if a private corner of her life had been dragged into harsh light without her consent. "You knew," Naomi said to Elijah quietly, "about this clause." He nodded once. "I didn't think it would matter." "But it does," she said. "It shouldn't," he replied. Cynthia gathered the papers and slid one toward Naomi. "This is a temporary suspension. But while we conduct a review." Naomi stared at the document. The words blurred together. Suspension. Review. Temporary. "Meaning I have to leave," she said. "For now," Cynthia confirmed. Elijah's voice cracked. "No." Cynthia didn't flinch. "Elijah, if you fight this, the board will assume the worst. They'll dig deeper. Into you. Into her." Naomi folded the paper carefully, her hands surprisingly steady. "When?" "Tonight," Cynthia said. The word landed like a slap. Elijah looked at Naomi, panic flickering across his usually controlled face. "This is my home," he said. "You can't." Naomi held up a hand. "It's okay." "No," he said. "It's not." She met his eyes. I don't want to be the reason you lose control of your own life. Cynthia nodded approvingly. A wise perspective. Naomi ignored her. She stood, smoothing her shirt, grounding herself in small movements. I'll pack my things, she said. Elijah's voice dropped. Don't go. She leaned closer to him, lowering her voice. I'm not abandoning you. It feels like it, he said. Her throat tightened. It feels like that to me too. As she walked down the hallway, the house felt different. Every familiar sound, the hum of the fridge, the creak of the floorboard, felt temporary now, as if she were already a memory. She packed slowly, carefully. When she reached the small box under her bed, she hesitated. Inside was the folded discharge bracelet she'd kept all these years. The hospital logo was faded, the plastic brittle. Proof she hadn't imagined it. She slipped it into her pocket. When she returned to the living room, Cynthia was gone. Elijah sat alone, staring at nothing. Naomi knelt beside him. I'll come back, she said. I promise. He didn't respond right away. Then, softly, I should have told you. Yes, she said. You should have. She stood, grabbing her bag, and paused at the door. Her hand rested on the frame, unwilling to let go. Behind her, Elijah spoke again. There's something else, he said. She turned. About that night, he continued. The reason I was there. Naomi's heart skipped. But before he could say more, the sound of tires crunching outside cut through the moment. Someone else had arrived. And whatever Elijah was about to confess would have to wait. Naomi stepped outside before she could lose her nerve. The evening air was cool, carrying the faint smell of cut grass and distant traffic. The driveway lights flicked on automatically, washing everything in a pale glow. A black sedan idled near the curb, engine humming softly. So that was who had arrived. The driver's door opened, and a man in his late 40s stepped out. He wore a simple jacket, no tie, but everything about him screamed purpose. He moved like someone used to being obeyed. Naomi, he said, not asking. She stopped a few feet away. Do I know you? He studied her for a moment, then nodded once. You don't. But I know you. That sent a chill down her spine. I'm Daniel Ross, he said. Private security. Formerly. For whom? She asked. Elijah, he replied. Before the accident. And for a while after. Naomi folded her arms, instinctively protective. You're here because of Cynthia? Not exactly, Daniel said. She didn't want me here. That surprised her. Then why are you? He glanced toward the house. Because Elijah called me. Naomi's heart skipped. When? Earlier today, Daniel said. After you left. She looked back at the house, the windows dark now. What does he want? Daniel hesitated, then chose his words carefully. He wants to make sure you're safe. From what? Naomi asked. Daniel's expression tightened. From the truth. They stood there in silence for a moment, the weight of that word pressing down on her. You should get in, he said finally. We shouldn't talk out here. Naomi didn't move. You said you know me. How? Daniel sighed. Because I was there too. That night at the hospital. Her breath caught. You were? Yes, he said. But not for the reason you think. Before she could ask more, the front door opened. Elijah's chair rolled into view, stopping just inside the doorway. Daniel, Elijah said sharply. That's enough. Daniel straightened, respectful but firm. You told me to tell her if it came to this. I told you to wait, Elijah replied. Naomi turned between them. Tell me what? Neither man spoke. Stop doing that, she said, frustration breaking through. Stop deciding what I can handle. Elijah looked at her, then really looked at her, and she saw something raw in his eyes. Regret. Fear. Resolve. Come back inside, he said quietly. Naomi hesitated, then nodded. The house felt different again when she stepped back in. Smaller. Like the walls were listening. They gathered in the living room. Daniel stood near the fireplace, hands clasped behind his back. Elijah positioned his chair so he faced Naomi directly. "You remember me saying I made a phone call?" Elijah began. "That night." "Yes," Naomi said. "You said that's all you did." "That wasn't true," he said. Daniel shifted slightly but stayed silent. Elijah continued, his voice steady but low. "I was at that hospital because of a meeting. A donor meeting. I was angry. Distracted. I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the pediatric wing." Naomi listened, her pulse loud in her ears. "I heard shouting," Elijah said. "A nurse arguing with a man who wanted to discharge a child early. You." Naomi's stomach clenched. "The man claimed to be your guardian," Elijah said. "But he didn't know basic things. Your birthday. Your school." Naomi's mouth went dry. "My uncle," she whispered. Daniel looked at her sharply. "He wasn't supposed to have custody," Naomi continued. "But he did. On paper." Elijah nodded. "I knew something was wrong. So I asked Daniel to look into it." Naomi turned to Daniel. "That night." "Yes," he said. "And the weeks after." Elijah took a breath. "What we found wasn't something we could ignore." Naomi felt the room tilt slightly. "What did you find?" Daniel spoke this time. "A pattern. Hospital visits. Missed school records. Financial activity tied to your name." Naomi's hands curled into fists. "You investigated my family." "We investigated a man who was hurting a child," Daniel said gently. Elijah's voice dropped. "And when the authorities stepped in, there were consequences. Quiet ones." Naomi's chest tightened painfully. "You mean he lost custody?" "Yes," Elijah said. "And my mother?" Naomi asked. "Why didn't she come?" Elijah closed his eyes. "Because she was already gone," he said. "She died 3 months before that night." The words hit Naomi like a physical blow. "No," she said. "That's not true." Daniel spoke softly. "It is. There was an overdose. Accidental, according to the report." Naomi shook her head, her breath coming fast. "No one told me." "You were a child," Elijah said. "And the system failed you more than once." The room was silent except for Naomi's uneven breathing. "So you didn't just help me," she said slowly. "You changed my life without telling me." Elijah met her gaze. "I didn't want you to feel owned by it." She laughed bitterly. "Owned?" "Elijah, I built my life around surviving things I never understood." "I know," he said. Daniel cleared his throat. "There's more." Naomi looked at him, dread pooling in her stomach. "More what?" "The review Cynthia started," Daniel said. "It's not really about the trust." Elijah's shoulders stiffened. "It's about what happens if certain records become public," Daniel continued. "Records that connect Elijah to an intervention he was never supposed to be part of." Naomi's eyes widened. "Why would that matter now?" Daniel's jaw tightened. "Because someone is looking for leverage." Elijah spoke, his voice grim. "And they know you're the key." Naomi felt the air leave her lungs. "Someone wants to use my past," she said slowly, "to control your future." Elijah nodded once. And in that moment, Naomi realized this wasn't just a story resurfacing. It was a threat that was only beginning to take shape. Naomi didn't stay long after that. She told herself it was practical, that she needed space to think. But as she drove away from the house, the truth pressed harder against her chest. Everything she thought she understood about her life now felt rearranged. Not erased. Reframed. She spent the night in a modest motel near the interstate. The kind with thin walls and flickering hallway lights. The bedspread smelled faintly of detergent and something older underneath. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying Elijah's words over and over. "Someone is looking for leverage. And they know you're the key." By morning, Naomi had made a decision she wasn't entirely comfortable with. She needed answers that didn't come filtered through Elijah's guilt or Daniel's restraint. She needed to see the files. Daniel met her at a quiet diner just after sunrise. He chose the booth farthest from the windows. A waitress poured coffee without asking questions. "You shouldn't be doing this," he said, sliding a thin folder across the table anyway. Naomi wrapped her fingers around the edge. "Then why did you bring it?" "Because if you're already in this," Daniel said, "you deserve the truth." She opened the folder slowly. Inside were photocopies, hospital intake forms, school attendance reports, notes written in clipped, professional language. Naomi recognized her own name again and again, always followed by phrases like inconsistent supervision and concerns noted. Her stomach twisted. "There," Daniel said quietly, pointing. She followed his finger to a line near the bottom of a page. Secondary contact, Elijah Hale. Naomi's breath caught. "You were listed." "Yes," Daniel said. "After that night. As an emergency contact. Temporarily." "You never told me," she said. "You never asked," he replied gently. She flipped another page and froze. There was a photograph clipped to the file. Grainy. Slightly out of focus. A younger Elijah stood in a hospital hallway, hand resting awkwardly on the back of a wheelchair. And beside him, Naomi. Smaller. Thinner. Her arm in a sling. Her face turned up toward him, wary but calm. She stared at it for a long time. "I don't remember this," she whispered. "Trauma does that," Daniel said. "It keeps what it can. Buries the rest." Naomi closed the folder. Her hands were shaking now. "You said someone is looking for leverage." "Who?" Daniel hesitated. "That's not my call to make," he said. She leaned forward. "Daniel, they've already pushed me out of my job. They're digging into my childhood. Whatever this is, it's not staying quiet." He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Elijah's accident wasn't just an accident," he said. The words landed slowly. "What do you mean?" Naomi asked. Daniel lowered his voice. "The official report says equipment failure. A freak malfunction during a charity event. But there were witnesses who said the safety checks had been rushed. And people who benefited from that." Naomi's pulse quickened. "Benefited how?" "Elijah was about to make changes," Daniel said. "Big ones. Redirect funding. Cut people out. And someone didn't like that," Naomi said. "Yes," Daniel replied. She sat back, absorbing it. "So now they're coming after him." "And you," Daniel added. "Because you're the soft point." Naomi's jaw tightened. "I'm not soft." "No," Daniel agreed. "You're human. That's what makes you useful to them." The waitress returned, refilling cups. The normalcy of the moment felt wrong. Too bright. Too ordinary. Naomi stood, leaving money on the table. "I need to talk to Elijah." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "Be careful." "I will," she said. "But I won't stay quiet." She drove back to the house with a clarity she hadn't felt in days. Fear was still there, coiled tight in her chest. But beneath it was something steadier. Resolve. When she arrived, the front door was already open. Inside, voices echoed down the hallway. One of them was Cynthia's. Naomi stepped in just as Cynthia said, "You should have let her go, Elijah. She complicates everything." Naomi rounded the corner. "No," she said. "You complicate everything." Cynthia turned, surprise flashing across her face before smoothing into irritation. "You're not authorized to be here." Naomi smiled thinly. "Funny. That's exactly how I feel about you." Elijah looked between them, tension etched deep into his features. Naomi held up the folder. "I know why you're really here. And I know what you're afraid of." Cynthia's eyes flicked to the folder despite herself. "Careful," Cynthia said. "You have no idea what you're stepping into." Naomi took a step forward. "I do. And I'm done letting other people tell my story for me." The room went very still. Because for the first time, Naomi wasn't reacting to the past. She was choosing how it would be used. Cynthia recovered quickly. She always did. Her expression settled into cool composure as she straightened her coat. If you think waving a few old documents around gives you leverage, you're mistaken. Naomi didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. I'm not waving anything. I'm asking questions. Elijah watched both women, his hands clenched in his lap. Cynthia, leave. Not yet, Cynthia replied. We're finally having an honest conversation. Naomi turned to Elijah. How long have you known the accident wasn't random? He hesitated. That was enough. Long enough, Naomi said. Cynthia smiled thinly. Careful, Naomi. Speculation can be dangerous. So can silence? Naomi shot back. Cynthia's eyes hardened. You think you're protecting him? You're a liability. Emotionally involved. With a documented history that can be framed. Naomi felt the familiar flare of anger, sharp and hot. You mean used? Cynthia didn't deny it. Elijah's voice cut in, low and furious. You promised me this wouldn't touch her. Cynthia turned to him. I promised to protect the estate, not your conscience. The words hung between them. Naomi took a breath. You're scared, she said to Cynthia. Not of me. Of what happens if this becomes public. Cynthia laughed softly. Public sympathy doesn't change legal outcomes. No, Naomi agreed. But patterns do. Especially when journalists start asking why certain records were sealed. Cynthia stiffened. Just a fraction. Elijah noticed. Naomi pressed on. You're not here because I complicate things. You're here because I connect dots you don't want connected. Cynthia stepped closer. You don't know what you're risking. Naomi met her gaze. I grew up risking worse. The silence stretched. Then Cynthia exhaled sharply. This ends one way, she said. You walk away. Quietly. And Elijah keeps what little control he has left. Naomi turned to him. Is that what you want? Elijah didn't answer immediately. His eyes were dark, conflicted. I don't want to lose you, he said finally. But I won't sacrifice you either. Naomi nodded. Then stopped trying to decide alone. Cynthia scoffed. This isn't a partnership. It's governance. Funny, Naomi said. Because governance without trust usually collapses. Cynthia's phone buzzed. She checked it, her expression shifting. I have to take this, she said, stepping aside. Naomi watched her pace near the window, murmuring into the phone. Elijah leaned toward Naomi. You don't have to fight this, he said quietly. I can arrange for you to leave the state. Start fresh. Her eyes flashed. I'm not something you relocate. I know, he said. I'm trying to keep you safe. I don't feel safe being erased, she replied. Cynthia ended the call and returned, her face unreadable. There's been a development. Elijah straightened. What kind? The board wants assurances, Cynthia said. They're concerned about optics. Naomi tilted her head. Meaning? Meaning, Cynthia said slowly, they want to know if your relationship with Elijah extends beyond employment. The question hung heavy. Elijah's breath caught. Naomi felt her own pulse spike. The truth was complicated. Messy. Unfinished. We haven't crossed any lines, Naomi said. Cynthia smiled faintly. That's not what I asked. Elijah spoke then, his voice steady. She's not manipulating me. And she's not leaving. Cynthia looked genuinely surprised. You're making a mistake, she said. Maybe, Elijah replied. But it's mine. Naomi felt a swell of something warm and terrifying in her chest. Cynthia gathered her things. This isn't over. Naomi watched her go, the door closing softly behind her. The house exhaled. Elijah turned to Naomi. You didn't have to do that. Yes, she said. I did. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of everything pressing in. There's something I haven't told you either, Naomi said. Elijah looked at her. About what? About why I came to work for you, she said. His brows knit. You said you needed the job. I did, she said. But that wasn't the whole truth. Her voice trembled just slightly. I recognized you sooner than I admitted. Elijah's breath caught. I didn't know from where, Naomi continued. But something in me knew you mattered. The room felt charged, electric. Elijah swallowed. Naomi. She stood. We're both carrying secrets. And someone is trying to use them. She met his eyes. If we're going to survive this, we stop hiding. Elijah nodded slowly. Outside, a car engine started. And somewhere beyond the walls of the house, Someone was already planning their next move. The night settled in heavy and quiet. Naomi stayed. Not because everything felt resolved, but because leaving now would have felt like surrender. She moved through the house with a careful awareness, as if the walls themselves had started keeping records. Elijah watched her from the living room, his gaze following the sound of her footsteps, the clink of a mug against the counter, the low hum of the kettle. Neither of them spoke much. It wasn't awkward. It was watchful. Later, when the house had fully darkened and only a few lamps cast soft pools of light, Elijah broke the silence. "Daniel is right," he said. "If someone is pushing Cynthia, it means they're impatient." Naomi leaned against the doorway. People get impatient when something they buried starts breathing. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "You've always had a way with words." She paused. "You said always." Elijah met her eyes. "Old habits." The smile faded. "I've been thinking," Naomi said, "about the accident." Elijah stiffened slightly. "What about it?" "You said the safety checks were rushed," she continued. "Who signed off on them?" He hesitated. That hesitation told her more than words. "Elijah," she said gently. "Who benefited?" He looked down at his hands. The board chair at the time. A man named Victor Langley. The name landed with weight. "I've heard it," Naomi said slowly. "Not from you. From Cynthia." Elijah nodded. "Langley controlled several contractors. Oversaw procurement. When I tried to pull funding, he delayed approvals. Created bottlenecks. And then the accident happened," Naomi said. "Yes." She crossed the room and sat across from him. "Did you ever confront him?" "I did," Elijah replied. Quietly. "He denied everything. And then he resigned." Naomi frowned. "That doesn't sound like someone who won." "He didn't," Elijah said. "Not immediately." She felt a chill. "What do you mean?" "He resurfaced 2 years ago," Elijah said. "With a new company. New investors. An influence I couldn't trace." Naomi's mind raced. "And now, suddenly, Cynthia shows up. The trust clause. The review." Elijah nodded. "It's pressure. Not proof." Naomi stood, pacing slowly. "They're trying to isolate you." "And you?" Elijah said. She stopped. "Why now?" "Because you came back into my life," he said quietly. The words hung between them. Naomi felt the truth of it settle deep. Her presence wasn't just inconvenient. It was destabilizing. "Then they made a mistake," she said. "Because I'm not going anywhere." A sharp knock cut through the room. Both of them froze. Elijah's chair whirred slightly as he turned toward the door. Naomi's heart began to pound. Another knock. Firmer this time. Naomi moved instinctively, positioning herself between Elijah and the hallway. "Stay here." "Naomi," he began. She shook her head. "Please." She reached the door and opened it a crack. Daniel stood outside, his expression tight, eyes scanning the street behind him. "You need to come with me," he said quietly. Naomi's stomach dropped. "What happened?" "Not here," Daniel replied. "Is Elijah alone?" "Yes," she said. "What's going on?" Daniel exhaled. "Someone accessed sealed juvenile records tonight." Naomi felt her breath catch. "Mine?" "Yes," Daniel said. "And not through the estate." Her pulse thundered in her ears. "Then who?" Daniel's eyes flicked toward the house. "Someone with old clearance. The kind Langley used to have." Elijah's voice carried from behind her. "Daniel?" Daniel straightened. "They're escalating." Naomi turned back to Elijah, fear and resolve colliding inside her. "They're digging into my past to get to you." Elijah's jaw set. "Then we stop letting them control the pace." Daniel nodded. "I've already arranged a secure location. Just for tonight." Naomi hesitated. "Running won't fix this." "It buys time," Daniel said. "And time matters." She looked at Elijah. For a moment, neither of them spoke. So much had been said already. Go, Elijah said finally. If they're watching, they'll expect you to leave. And you? Naomi asked. I'll stay, he replied. Let them think I'm predictable. Naomi shook her head. I don't like this. I know, he said softly. But I trust you. The words hit harder than any argument. Naomi grabbed her jacket. At the door she turned back. This isn't over, she said. Elijah met her gaze. No. It's just begun. As she stepped into the night and Daniel closed the door behind her, Naomi felt the weight of everything she didn't yet know. And somewhere, someone was already watching her leave. The secure location turned out to be a narrow townhouse tucked between two auto shops on a side street that didn't even show up on most navigation apps. Daniel let Naomi in through a back entrance. Inside, the air smelled faintly of dust and old paper. The place was bare except for a table, a few chairs, and a humming laptop already open. You live here? Naomi asked. No, Daniel said. I keep it. For moments like this? He didn't answer. Naomi dropped into one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted. Tell me what they found. Daniel leaned against the table. Not everything. Yet. But enough to start shaping a story. What kind of story? The kind where you become unstable. Where your past gets twisted into a liability. Naomi's jaw tightened. I won't let them turn me into a villain. They don't need a villain, Daniel said. Just a distraction. The laptop chimed. Daniel stepped over and glanced at the screen. They've pulled your juvenile medical records, he said. But they didn't stop there. Naomi felt a chill. What else? Court filings. Emergency guardianship motions. Things that were sealed after the intervention. Her hands curled into fists. Those were supposed to be protected. They were, Daniel replied. Until someone with the right access decided to reopen them. Naomi stood pacing. Langley. Yes, Daniel said. Or someone acting for him. She stopped. Why not go straight for Elijah? Because Elijah is fortified, Daniel said. Teams of lawyers. Layers of public goodwill. But you. I'm easier, Naomi finished. Human, Daniel corrected. Relatable. And now emotionally connected to him. Naomi sank back into the chair. So they smear me. Paint me as unstable or manipulative. Undermine anything I say. Exactly. Silence stretched between them. Do you think Elijah is safe? Naomi asked. For now, Daniel said. He's being watched but not in danger. Not yet. That's not comforting. It's honest. The laptop chimed again. Daniel frowned at the screen. What? Naomi asked. Someone is leaking pieces of your file to a media contact, he said. Not a big outlet. A blogger. They're testing reactions. Naomi's heart dropped. What kind of pieces? Daniel hesitated. Enough to suggest neglect. Instability. A troubled childhood. She let out a bitter laugh. That's not even wrong. They'll spin it, Daniel said. Make it look like you're exploiting Elijah out of desperation. Naomi's chest tightened painfully. He doesn't deserve this. Neither do you, Daniel replied. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She froze. Elijah. She answered quickly. Are you okay? I'm fine, he said. But Cynthia just left. Naomi's stomach twisted. Did she say anything? She warned me, Elijah replied. That things were about to get ugly. Naomi closed her eyes. They already are. I know, he said. Daniel filled me in. About the records? She asked. Yes, Elijah said. And about Langley. There was a pause. Then, Naomi, I'm sorry. I pulled you into this. You didn't, she replied. They did. Another pause. Softer this time. I miss you being here. Her throat tightened. I'll come back. When? Soon, she said. When it's safer. I don't want safe, Elijah said quietly. I want honest. Naomi swallowed. You have it. They hung up, and for a moment Naomi just sat there, staring at the wall. Daniel spoke gently. There's something else. She looked up. What now? Langley didn't just access your records, Daniel said. He also pulled Elijah's. Naomi's breath caught. Why? Because there's a detail in them, Daniel said slowly, that connects you to him in a way neither of you realized. Her heart began to race. What detail? Daniel looked at her, his expression unreadable. A witness statement, he said. From the night of your hospital stay. Naomi leaned forward. What does it say? That the man who tried to take you, Daniel replied, wasn't just your uncle. Naomi's world tilted. Then who was he? She whispered. Daniel took a breath. He was also connected to Victor Langley. The words landed like a thunderclap. Naomi felt cold all over. So this isn't just about money, she said slowly. It never was. No, Daniel agreed. It's about what that man knew. And what he was trying to keep quiet, Naomi added. Daniel nodded. Outside, a car passed, its headlights briefly cutting through the blinds. Naomi stared at the sliver of light. Because suddenly her past wasn't just painful. It was dangerous. Naomi didn't sleep. She sat on the edge of the narrow bed in the townhouse, staring at the wall, the weight of Daniel's last words pressing on her chest. Connected to Victor Langley. The man who had claimed to be her uncle. The man who had tried to take her out of that hospital. The man she had spent years trying to forget. Now he had a name again. And a shadow that reached all the way into Elijah's life. By morning, Naomi was done waiting. I need to see him, she told Daniel, pulling on her jacket. Elijah? Daniel asked. No, she said. Langley. Daniel's expression hardened. That's not possible. Then make it possible, Naomi replied. If he's behind this, he didn't expect me to understand it. That's my advantage. Daniel shook, reminding. This is not some closure journey. He's dangerous. So is letting him control the story, she shot back. Daniel studied her, then sighed. I know where his office is. But we don't go alone. They drove in silence across the city, the skyline slowly rising in the distance. Naomi watched the buildings pass, each one reminding her how small a single life could be when powerful people decided to erase it. Langley's office was in a renovated warehouse near the waterfront. Polished concrete. Glass walls. The kind of place meant to look transparent while hiding everything that mattered. Daniel left her in the car. If this turns wrong, you walk. No heroics. Naomi nodded. Just answers. She went in alone. Victor Langley was older than she remembered. His hair was silver now, his face lined, but his eyes were the same. Sure. Measuring. Naomi, he said as if he'd been expecting her. You've grown. Her skin crawled. You knew my name. I know many things, Langley replied. Sit. She didn't. You were never my uncle, Naomi said. So what were you? Langley smiled faintly. A man trying to clean up a problem. My life was not a problem, she snapped. It was, he said calmly. To certain people. Naomi's heart pounded. Elijah Hale. Yes, Langley said. Brilliant. Idealistic. Annoyingly ethical. Naomi's fists clenched. What did I have to do with him? Langley leaned back in his chair. Your mother. The words hit her like a blow. She knew something, Langley continued. Something about a set of offshore accounts Elijah was preparing to shut down. Accounts that funded very influential people. Naomi's breath came shallow. How would my mother know that? She worked for one of those shell companies, Langley said. She realized what it was. And she panicked. Naomi shook her head. She would have gone to the police. And ruin everything? Langley replied. No. She went to Elijah. Naomi's heart raced. Before she died. Yes, Langley said. And that made you inconvenient. Naomi felt sick. You killed her. Langley didn't answer directly. Her death was ruled an accident. You used me, Naomi whispered. You were leverage, Langley corrected. If Elijah backed off, you would be safe. And when he didn't? Langley's eyes darkened. Then I tried to remove you from the equation. Naomi's legs trembled. That night at the hospital. You were being transferred, he said. I needed you quiet. Out of sight. But Elijah was there, Naomi said. Yes, Langley replied. And he refused to look away. The truth slammed into place. You paralyzed him, Naomi said softly. Not just with an accident, but with everything that followed. Langley smiled thinly. I didn't push the button. I just made sure the right people were in the room. Naomi backed toward the door. You're going to pay for this. Langley chuckled. People like me don't pay, Naomi. We settle. She left before he could say anything else, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. Outside, Daniel was already moving. What happened? He asked. Naomi's voice shook. Everything. She got into the car. Take me back to Elijah, she said. Daniel started the engine. Are you sure? Yes, Naomi replied. He deserves the truth. As the car pulled away, Naomi looked back at the building. Langley had spent years trying to bury her story. Now it was going to bury him. Naomi didn't stop shaking until they were halfway back to Elijah's house. Daniel drove fast but controlled, eyes constantly flicking to the mirrors. The city blurred past in streaks of gray and gold, but Naomi barely saw it. Her mind was still inside Langley's office, replaying his voice, his calm cruelty. Your mother. Leverage. Remove you from the equation. When they reached the house, the front lights were on. Too many of them. That's not normal, Daniel said quietly. Naomi's heart lurched. Is he in danger? Daniel slowed the car. Stay here. But Naomi was already unbuckling. They rushed to the front door. It was unlocked. Inside, the house felt wrong. Too quiet. The air heavy with something unsaid. Elijah? Naomi called. No answer. They followed the sound of voices down the hall toward the study. One voice was Cynthia's. The other was unfamiliar. Confident. Daniel raised a hand, signaling Naomi to stop. But she was already at the doorway. Victor Langley stood inside Elijah's study. He looked perfectly at ease, hands resting on the back of a chair as if he owned the place. Elijah sat across from him, pale but composed, his wheelchair angled slightly away. Cynthia stood off to the side, her face tight. Naomi stepped in. You really don't waste time, she said. Langley turned slowly. Naomi. I was hoping you'd join us. Cynthia's eyes widened. You weren't supposed to be here. Naomi ignored her. I know what you did. Langley smiled faintly. People always think that. You used my mother, Naomi said. You killed her when she tried to expose you. Elijah's head snapped toward her. What? Langley sighed. This is getting messy. Naomi moved closer to Elijah. He admitted it. He said she went to you. That she tried to stop the offshore accounts. Elijah's face went ashen. You used Naomi as leverage, Elijah said slowly. That's why you were at the hospital. Langley inclined his head. I needed you to make a choice. Elijah's voice shook. So you destroyed my body to protect your money? I protected a system, Langley replied. One you threatened. Cynthia spoke quickly. This is exactly why I told you to stay out of it, Elijah. These accusations. Shut up, Naomi snapped. Cynthia flinched. Naomi turned back to Langley. You're done. Langley laughed softly. You think a few emotional revelations undo decades of power? No, Naomi said. But evidence does. Daniel stepped in, holding up his phone. We've been recording. Langley's smile faltered for the first time. That was illegal, he said. So was murder, Naomi replied. Elijah stared at Langley. You ruined my life. Langley straightened. You ruined your own by refusing to look away. Sirens wailed faintly in the distance. Cynthia's face drained of color. Victor, what did you do? Langley's eyes darted toward the window. It seems, he said calmly, that this meeting is over. He moved suddenly, heading for the back door. Daniel lunged. Langley shoved past him, but Naomi was already blocking the hall. Their eyes met for a split second. The man who had once held her future in his hands now looked small. You can't outrun this, Naomi said. Langley hesitated. That was all it took. Daniel tackled him from behind. They hit the floor hard. By the time the police burst through the front door, Langley was pinned, shouting, his perfect composure gone. Elijah watched from his chair, silent tears tracking down his face. Naomi knelt beside him. It's over, she whispered. He looked at her, broken and relieved all at once. My God, your mother? Naomi closed her eyes. I know. As officers led Langley away, Cynthia stood frozen, her career and loyalties crumbling around her. The truth had finally caught up, and it wasn't letting anyone go quietly. The house felt different after the police left. Not quieter, not calmer, lighter. Like something heavy had been lifted from the air, even though nothing about what had happened felt light at all. Naomi sat on the floor beside Elijah's chair. Neither of them had spoken in several minutes. Sirens had faded into distant echoes. The night outside the windows looked unchanged, which somehow made everything feel more unreal. They took him, Elijah finally said. Yes, Naomi replied softly. They did. He swallowed. I kept thinking I was angry because I'd lost my body, but now I realize I was angry because I lost the truth. Naomi rested her head lightly against the arm of his chair. You weren't crazy for feeling it. I should have fought harder, he said. I should have known. You did fight, Naomi replied. You just didn't know what you were fighting. Silence settled again, but it wasn't empty this time. It was full of everything that had finally been said out loud. Daniel came in from the kitchen with 2 mugs of tea. He handed one to Naomi. The media will be loud tomorrow, he said. Langley won't disappear quietly. I don't care, Naomi said. Let them talk. Elijah gave a small, tired smile. You always did have a talent for refusing to be small. Naomi looked at him. You don't get to call me small ever again. He nodded. Deal. Daniel left them alone. Naomi shifted closer to Elijah. There's something I need to say. He looked at her, eyes still red. Go on. I didn't come back into your life just because I needed a job, she said. I felt something, like a thread pulling me. I didn't understand it, but I followed it. Elijah's voice was quiet. So did I. Naomi took a breath. I don't know what this is yet. I just know it's real. It's complicated, Elijah said. Yes, she agreed. And messy. And probably not easy. He smiled faintly. You're not exactly known for choosing easy. They shared a soft laugh, the first one that didn't feel forced in a long time. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights brushing the walls. Life was moving on even if they were still catching up. You're staying? Elijah said. Not a question. Naomi nodded. I am. Not because you need me, but because I want to be here. He looked down, then back up. I don't want you to feel obligated. I don't, she said. I feel connected. He exhaled slowly, emotion flickering across his face. So do I. They didn't touch. Not yet. But the space between them felt charged with something tender and new. Naomi stood and went to the window. Dawn was just beginning to break, turning the sky pale blue. Looks like we made it to another morning, she said. Elijah rolled his chair beside her. We did. She glanced at him. We still have a lot to figure out. Yes, he said. But for the first time, I don't feel like I'm doing it alone. Naomi smiled. And as the sun rose over a future neither of them could have predicted, one thing felt quietly certain. Some stories begin in pain, but not all of them end there. Before we fade out, if you've been writing this story with us all the way through, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you feel like it, drop a comment and tell us where you're watching from. It helps more than you know. Because sometimes, the stories that stay with us the longest are the ones that remind us we're not alone.